In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores, there exists a truth so profound that it reshapes everything we thought we knew about heroism, sacrifice, and the bonds that transcend species. What happens when a most powerful being in the known universe discovers that her salvation came not from advanced technology, superior weaponry, or ancient magic, but from the most unlikely source imaginable? What happens when strength meets compassion, when power encounters humility, and when the rescued finally learns the identity of her rescuer? This is the story of a moment that changed the course of galactic history. A story of a human who dared to act when gods and empires stood paralyzed. A story of a response so unexpected, so deeply moving, that it left entire civilizations questioning their understanding of what it truly means to be heroic. Prepare yourself for a tale that will challenge everything you believe about power, about courage, and about the extraordinary capacity of an ordinary human heart to change the universe itself. The maintenance bay of the cargo hauler's steady fortune hummed with the quiet efficiency of well-maintained machinery. Marcus Chun wiped grease from his hands with a stained rag, his weathered face showing the kind of contentment that came from honest work well done. At 52, he had found peace in the simple rhythm of interstellar freight runs, far from the chaos of intercolony politics and the endless wars that seemed to plague every corner of human space. The ship's AI, a basic model called Jenny, chimed softly. "Marcus, we're receiving an emergency broadcast. Priority 1, galactic frequency." Marcus frowned. Priority 1 meant life and death, usually on a scale that dwarfed individual concerns. "Put it through, Jenny." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a scene that made Marcus's blood freeze. The Vorthack Dominion's war fleet, their massive dreadnoughts like metallic mountains against the star field, surrounded what appeared to be a small, crystalline ship. The vessel was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly, its surfaces seeming to bend light itself into patterns that suggested vast intelligence and even vaster power. "This is Admiral Krieg of the Vorthack Third Fleet." The transmission began, the alien's voice carrying the distinctive grinding tone of his species. "We have cornered the terrorist known as the Shaper. She will surrender herself for immediate execution, or we will detonate antimatter charges that will sterilize this entire system." Marcus had heard of the Shaper, of course. Everyone in known space had. She was a being of legend, perhaps myth, credited with reshaping dying worlds, stopping genocides, and performing feats that bordered on the miraculous. The various governments couldn't agree on whether she was an advanced alien, a rogue AI, or something else entirely. What they did agree on was that she had been systematically dismantling the Vorthack Dominion's slave operations for the past decade. The crystalline ship pulsed with soft light, and another voice filled the comm channel. This one was different, melodic, and achingly beautiful, carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's chest. "I will not surrender to your tribunal, Admiral Krieg. The lives you have taken, the worlds you have enslaved, the children you have sold into bondage, these crimes will not go unanswered." "Then you condemn millions to die with your arrogance," Krieg snarled. "This system contains 17 inhabited worlds, 47 billion sentient beings. Their deaths will be on your conscience, Shaper." Marcus watched the tactical display with growing horror. The Vorthack weren't bluffing. Their antimatter weapons were already charging, and sensor readings confirmed the presence of enough destructive force to crack planets. The Shaper's ship, for all its alien beauty, was vastly outnumbered. "Jenny," Marcus said quietly, "what's our position relative to the engagement?" "We're approximately 12,000 kilometers from the Vorthack perimeter, Marcus, well outside their immediate sensor focus." Marcus stared at the display for a long moment. He was a freight hauler, nothing more. His ship was designed to carry cargo from one system to another, not engage in military operations. He had a plasma cutter for salvage work, some basic shields, and, a turn of speed that was respectable for a civilian vessel, but laughable compared to military craft. But he also had something else, something the Vorthack wouldn't expect. Jenny, do we still have that load of industrial explosives from the mining operation on Kepler-7? Yes, Marcus. 40 tons of controlled fusion charges, properly contained and stable. Marcus began moving toward the pilot's seat, his mind racing through calculations. And the plasma cutter, can we reroute its power output? I don't understand what you're planning, Marcus, but yes, the cutter can be overcharged. However, doing so would burn out the entire system and likely cause significant damage to our ship. How significant? Potentially catastrophic. The power feedback could destroy our engines, life support, and navigation systems. Marcus strapped himself into the pilot's chair and began bringing the ship's systems online. Jenny, I need you to calculate a ramming trajectory toward the Vorthack flagship. Factor in our cargo, our fuel reserves, and maximum acceleration. Marcus, the AI's voice carried an unusual note of concern. What you're suggesting would be suicide. You're one man in a cargo hauler. This won't make any difference. Maybe not, Marcus said, his fingers dancing over the controls. But I can't just sit here and watch them murder 47 billion people because one person won't surrender to execution. The Steady Fortune began to move, her fusion engines pushing her toward the massive Vorthack fleet. Marcus knew he had perhaps minutes before they detected his approach, maybe less. He activated the ship's emergency beacon, broadcasting on all frequencies. This is Captain Marcus Chun of the independent hauler Steady Fortune. I'm carrying 40 tons of fusion explosives, and I'm on a collision course with the Vorthack flagship. I recommend immediate evacuation of this system. The response was immediate chaos. The Vorthack fleet began to reposition, their massive ships turning with ponderous grace to face this new threat. But Marcus had counted on their arrogance, their certainty that no single civilian vessel would dare challenge them. Human vessel, alter course immediately or be destroyed. Admiral Krieg's voice crackled over the comm. Marcus didn't respond. Instead, he pushed the Steady Fortune's engines beyond their safety limits, feeling the deck plating vibrate under the strain. The ship groaned and shuddered, but she held together, racing toward the center of the Vorthack formation at a velocity that would make impact inevitable. The Vorthack opened fire, their energy weapons painting space around the Steady Fortune with deadly light. Marcus jinked and weaved, using every trick he'd learned in 30 years of flying to stay ahead of their targeting systems. His ship's shields flared and sparked, overloading under the massive energy discharge. Shaper, Marcus broadcast, hoping the crystalline vessel could hear him. When I hit their flagship, you need to run. Don't let this be for nothing. The beautiful voice responded immediately. Human vessel, I cannot allow you to sacrifice yourself. Alter your course. Can't do that, ma'am, Marcus replied, watching the Vorthack flagship grow larger on his screen. Someone has to stand up to these bastards. Might as well be me. What happened next would be debated by military historians for centuries. The Steady Fortune, moving at nearly 15% of light speed and carrying enough explosives to level a city, struck the Vorthack flagship's forward shields. The impact was catastrophic, a brilliant flower of light that could be seen from the outer planets of the system. But Marcus had miscalculated in one crucial way. The explosion didn't just destroy the flagship. The chain reaction spread to two nearby vessels, then to an ammunition ship, then to the antimatter charges themselves. In the space of 30 seconds, 3/4 of the Vorthack fleet simply ceased to exist. The Shaper's crystalline ship hung motionless in space for a long moment, surrounded by the burning wreckage of what had been the Dominion's most powerful battle group. Then, slowly, it began to move toward the expanding cloud of debris that had once been the Steady Fortune. Inside her ship, the being known as the Shaper extended her consciousness, searching through the wreckage for any sign of life. What she found defied everything she thought she knew about human resilience. Marcus Chun was alive, barely, protected by an emergency stasis pod that had deployed at the moment of impact. But he was dying, his life force flickering like a candle in a hurricane. Without hesitation, she reached out with abilities that few beings in the galaxy possessed, stabilizing his failing biological systems, repairing damage that should have been fatal. She had saved countless lives over the centuries, but something about this human, this cargo hauler who had thrown himself against impossible odds to protect strangers, moved her in ways she hadn't expected. As Marcus's eyes fluttered open in the medical bay of her ship, the Shaper made a decision that would echo through the galaxy. She would not reveal herself to him. Not yet. Instead, she would ensure he survived, would give him a new ship, a new life, and the knowledge that his sacrifice had mattered. But she would also begin to study him, to understand what drove a simple freight hauler to face down a battle fleet. Because in all her centuries of existence, in all her travels across the galaxy, she had never encountered anything quite like human courage. The willingness to act when action seemed pointless, to stand when standing meant certain death. Marcus recovered his consciousness 3 days later on a medical station in the outer system, with no memory of how he had gotten there. The official reports listed him as the sole survivor of a terrorist attack on the freight convoy, a random victim who had been rescued by a passing medical ship. His own vessel was listed as a total loss. But when he checked his personal account, he found enough credits to buy a new ship, along with a message from an anonymous benefactor thanking him for his service to galactic peace. The money was more than he could have made in 10 years of hauling freight. But Marcus found himself strangely uninterested in early retirement. Instead, he bought a new ship, another hauler he named Second Chance, and went back to work. Something had changed inside him during those missing days, a sense of purpose he couldn't quite define. He began taking contracts in the frontier regions, places where honest freight haulers were desperately needed, but where the pay was uncertain and the risks high. What Marcus didn't know was that he was being watched, protected by sensors and technologies beyond human comprehension. The Shaper had made him her project, studying not just his actions, but the fundamental nature of human moral courage. She watched as he diverted from profitable routes to deliver medical supplies to plague-stricken colonies. She observed as he used his ship's tractor beam to pull disabled vessels to safety, never asking for payment. She documented his habit of carrying extra food and water, just in case he encountered refugees or stranded travelers. Over the months that followed the destruction of the Vorthack fleet, the Shaper began to understand something profound about humanity. They were not the strongest species in the galaxy, nor the smartest, nor the most technologically advanced. But they possessed something that all her centuries of existence had not prepared her for: the ability to act from pure moral conviction, regardless of personal cost. Marcus Chun hauled freight across the Outer Rim, unaware that his simple acts of decency were being cataloged by one of the most powerful beings in known space. He didn't know that his willingness to share his emergency rations with hungry refugees was being analyzed by intellects that could calculate the orbital mechanics of entire star systems. He had no idea that his habit of checking on isolated research stations and frontier settlements was being viewed as data points in a study of human nature that would ultimately reshape the political landscape of the galaxy. But changes were coming, consequences of his moment of courage that would ripple outward like waves from a dropped stone. The Vorthack Dominion, crippled by the loss of their primary battle fleet, was beginning to fracture. Slave rebellions erupted across their territory, inspired by reports that someone, anyone, had been willing to stand up to their seeming invincibility. And somewhere in the crystalline depths of her ship, the Shaper was preparing to make a choice that would alter the balance of power in the galaxy forever. She was preparing to reveal herself to the human who had saved her, to thank him properly for his sacrifice. She had no idea that her response would stun every civilization in known space. 6 months after the incident that the galactic news networks had dubbed the Vorthack disaster, Marcus Chun was making a routine supply run to the agricultural colony of New Hebron when his life changed forever. The colony was struggling. Their primary food processor had broken down, and they were facing starvation before the next harvest. Marcus had diverted from a more profitable run to bring them replacement parts, selling them at cost despite the financial hit to his own operations. As he supervised the unloading of the equipment, his ship's proximity alarms began to sound. Jenny's voice crackled through his comm unit with an edge of confusion that Marcus had never heard from the AI before. "Marcus, I'm detecting an approaching vessel, but the sensor readings are unusual. The ship appears to be composed of some kind of crystalline material, and it's generating energy signatures that don't match anything in our database." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard descriptions of such a vessel in the news reports following the Vorthack incident. Every spacer in the galaxy had heard the stories, though most dismissed them as exaggerated propaganda. "How big is it, Jenny?" "Approximately 800 meters in length, but, Marcus, the mass readings are impossible. According to our sensors, it weighs almost nothing, as if the entire structure is somehow exempt from normal physical laws." The crystalline ship materialized above the colony like a dream made manifest. Its surfaces caught and refracted the light of New Hebron's sun, creating patterns of beauty that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes were designed to process. The colonists emerged from their buildings, pointing and whispering in voices filled with awe and terror. Marcus stood in the cargo bay of his ship, watching through the open doors as the impossible vessel descended toward the landing field. It moved without any visible means of propulsion, settling onto the ground with a grace that defied everything he understood about physics and engineering. A section of the crystalline hull simply ceased to exist, creating an opening through which a figure emerged. Marcus's breath caught in his throat as he got his first clear look at the being known throughout the galaxy as the Shaper. She was humanoid in basic form, but clearly not human. Her skin had a translucent quality that seemed to glow with inner light, and her hair moved as if suspended in water despite the absence of any breeze. She wore robes that shifted color like oil on water, and her eyes held depths that suggested intelligence spanning millennia. But what struck Marcus most profoundly was the expression on her face as she approached him. There was recognition there, and something else, something that looked almost like reverence. "Marcus Chun," she said, and her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in his bones. "I've been looking for you." The colonists had gathered at a respectful distance, their faces showing the kind of awe typically reserved for religious experiences. Marcus found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "Ma'am, I think you might have me confused with someone else. I'm just a freight hauler." The Shaper stopped a few feet away from him, and Marcus could see tears forming in her luminous eyes. "You are Marcus Chun, captain of the cargo vessel Steady Fortune. 6 months ago, you sacrificed your life to save mine and prevented the genocide of 47 billion sentient beings." Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some mistake. I've never met you before. The Steady Fortune was destroyed in a terrorist attack, and I was rescued by a medical ship. I don't remember much about it." The Shaper's expression became infinitely sad. "You do not remember because I erased those memories to protect you. The knowledge of what you had done, of how close you came to death, was causing psychological trauma that threatened your recovery. But I have watched you these past months, Marcus Chun, and I have seen that your courage was not an aberration. It is the fundamental nature of who you are." She gestured, and a holographic display materialized in the air between them. Marcus watched in stunned silence as the events of that day played out before him. His ship's desperate charge toward the Vorthack fleet, the explosion that had devastated the enemy formation, his own apparent death in the fireball. "That's impossible," Marcus whispered. "No one could survive that." "You did not survive it," the Shaper replied gently. "You died, Marcus Chun. For 17 minutes, your heart stopped beating, your brain showed no activity, and every medical instrument declared you deceased. I brought you back, using abilities that few beings in this galaxy possess. But I could not undo the fact that you had been willing to die for strangers you had never met. The implications of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had died, actually died, and this being this legend that governments feared and revered in equal measure had somehow reversed death itself to save a simple cargo hauler. Why, he asked. Why would you do that for me? The Shaper's smile transformed her face, making her appear almost human despite her obvious alienness. Because in all my centuries of existence, across all the civilizations I have encountered, I have never witnessed anything like what you did. You had no weapons that could harm the Vorthak fleet. You knew your death was certain. You gained nothing from your actions except the knowledge that you had done the right thing. That kind of moral courage is rarer than any element in the periodic table. Marcus looked around at the colonists, all of whom were recording this conversation with whatever devices they had available. He realized that within hours, this encounter would be broadcast across the entire galaxy. I'm not special, he said finally. Any decent person would have done the same thing. The Shaper's laugh was like music made of starlight. Oh, Marcus Chun, if only that were true. Do you know what happened when the Galactic Council learned of the Vorthak fleet's destruction? They spent 3 weeks debating whether to send a formal protest to the human government for unauthorized military action. When they discovered it was one man in a cargo hauler, they demanded to know what secret weapon humanity had deployed. She moved closer, her presence somehow making the air around them shimmer with possibility. But I've spent these months studying your species, and I have learned something that terrifies every other civilization in known space. Humans possess something that we have lost, something that we abandoned in our pursuit of power and longevity and technological advancement. What's that? Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer. The willingness to sacrifice everything for strangers. The ability to act on moral conviction even when logic dictates an action. You call it being decent, but it is actually the rarest quality in the universe. Most species develop beyond it as they evolve. They become too wise, too careful, too aware of consequences to risk everything for principles. The Shaper gestured toward her crystalline ship. I have the power to reshape matter at the molecular level, to manipulate gravity and time, to influence the thoughts of lesser minds. I can crack planets or heal dying stars. But I cannot do what you did. I cannot choose certain death for the sake of strangers. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was telling him. So what happens now? Now, the Shaper said, I repay my debt to you. And in doing so, I change the balance of power in this galaxy forever. She raised her hand, and reality seemed to bend around her fingers. The air above the landing field shimmered, and suddenly there were shapes materializing, ships, but not like any ships Marcus had ever seen. They were clearly human in design, but enhanced with technology that made them seem like works of art rather than mere machines. I have spent the past 6 months studying human engineering, human innovation, human approaches to problem solving. I have taken your most advanced designs and enhanced them with knowledge accumulated over millennia. These ships are my gift to humanity. There were 12 vessels in total, ranging from sleek fighters to massive capital ships. Each one pulsed with energy signatures that made Marcus's instruments register readings that should have been impossible. This is incredible, Marcus breathed, but I can't accept this. I don't represent humanity. I don't have the authority to. You have the only authority that matters, the Shaper interrupted. You have the moral authority of someone who is willing to die to protect life. These ships are not a gift to your governments or your militaries. They're a gift to people like you, individuals who will use them to protect the innocent and defend the defenseless. She turned to address the colonists who had been watching this exchange in awed silence. Let it be known throughout the galaxy that the Shaper has chosen her champions. Humanity will no longer stand alone against the darkness between the stars. Marcus stared at the impossible fleet floating above them. What are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to continue being exactly who you are. the Shaper replied. Take these ships to those who need them. Find the humans who share your courage, your compassion, your willingness to act when action is required. Create a force that answers to no government, no corporation, no political entity, only to the moral imperative to protect life. She gestured again, and one of the smaller ships descended toward them. It was beautiful in a way that made Marcus's heart ache, its hull seeming to flow like liquid metal, while somehow maintaining perfect structural integrity. This one is yours, the Shaper said. I have named her the Second Chance, after the vessel you chose for yourself. But where your current ship can carry cargo between systems, this one can carry hope between civilizations. Marcus walked slowly toward the ship, his mind reeling. A boarding ramp extended from its belly, and he could see an interior that combined human design principles with technology that seemed almost magical. The ship's AI is an evolution of your Jenny, the Shaper explained. She retains all the memories of your previous adventures, but has been enhanced with capabilities that will allow her to interface with any known computer system. The ship itself can travel between any 2 points in the galaxy in a matter of hours, can shield itself from virtually any weapon, and can manufacture whatever equipment or supplies you might need. Marcus turned back to the Shaper, struggling to process the enormity of what was happening. This is too much. I'm just one man. You are Marcus Chun, she replied with absolute conviction. You are the human who proved that heroism still exists in a galaxy that has forgotten what the word means. You are my gift to a universe that desperately needs to remember that sometimes one person willing to do the right thing can change everything. The crystalline ship began to rise, the Shaper walking backward up a ramp that seemed to form itself from solid light. The galaxy is watching, Marcus Chun. They are waiting to see what humanity does with the tools I have given you. Show them what one decent human being can accomplish when they have the means to act on their convictions. As her ship disappeared into the afternoon sky, Marcus stood surrounded by impossible vessels and awestruck colonists, feeling the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders like a mantle he had never asked for but could not refuse to wear. The news of the Shaper's gift spread across the galaxy within hours, carried by the colonists' transmissions and confirmed by orbital sensors that had recorded the entire encounter. Governments convened emergency sessions. Military leaders analyzed the new ship's capabilities with growing alarm. Philosophers debated the implications of an alien entity choosing to elevate a single species above all others. But in a small agricultural colony on the edge of nowhere, Marcus Chun simply stood looking at a ship that could take him anywhere in the universe, understanding for the first time that his life had become something far larger than he had ever imagined. The response that would stun the galaxy was still to come, but already the first ripples of change were spreading outward, carrying with them the promise that the universe was about to discover what humanity could accomplish when given the tools to match their courage. The Galactic Council chambers had never witnessed anything quite like the emergency session that convened 3 weeks after the Shaper's gift to humanity. Representatives from every major civilization sat in their designated sections, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of concern, outrage, and barely concealed fear. Ambassador Kelthin of the Andromedan hegemony, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic patterns, spoke first. This action by the entity, known as the Shaper, represents an unprecedented disruption of galactic balance. Humanity has been elevated far beyond their natural technological progression, creating a potential threat to every established civilization. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Zephyrian delegate, her gaseous form contained within a specialized environment suit, added her voice to the protests. We have monitored the capabilities of these vessels. They possess technology that surpasses our most advanced research by centuries. One human with such a ship could potentially challenge an entire fleet. But it was the Vorthak representative who spoke with the most venom. Admiral Threx, recently promoted to replace the deceased Krieg, stood with the bearing of someone who had personally witnessed the devastating effectiveness of human determination. The Vorthak Dominion has lost 3 entire battle groups to human action in the past 6 months, he declared, his voice carrying the grinding menace typical of his species. First, the terrorist Chun destroyed our 3rd fleet with a suicide attack. Now, humans equipped with Shaper technology have liberated 17 slave worlds, destroyed 4 major military installations, and crippled our operations across 3 sectors. The human representative, Ambassador Sarah Martinez, listened to the accusations with growing amazement. She had been as surprised as anyone by the Shaper's gift, and the reports of human activities across the galaxy had reached Earth through commercial channels rather than diplomatic ones. Distinguished colleagues, Martinez began, I must clarify that these actions are not sanctioned by any human government. The individuals using these ships appear to be acting independently, following the example set by Captain Marcus Chun. That makes them terrorists, snarled Admiral Threx. They attack legitimate government operations without declaration of war or formal authority. They attack slave markets, Martinez replied coolly. They liberate beings held in bondage. They provide protection for colonies under threat. If these actions qualify as terrorism in your definition, perhaps your definition needs revision. The Andromedan ambassador's form shifted to a darker hue, indicating serious displeasure. The issue is not their intentions, but their capabilities. 12 humans now possess technology that could threaten established order throughout known space. This represents an unacceptable disruption of galactic stability. High Chancellor Vex of the Centauri Federation, whose people had maintained neutrality in most galactic conflicts, raised a tentacle for recognition. Perhaps we should examine what these humans have actually accomplished before we condemn their actions. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with highlighted systems marking recent human activity. The pattern was striking in its consistency. In every case, Chancellor Vex continued, human intervention has occurred in situations where local authorities had either failed to act or were themselves perpetrating atrocities. The liberation of the Kepler mining worlds freed over 2 million enslaved beings. The intervention at Proxima 7 prevented a genocide that would have claimed 10 million lives. The disruption of the Sigma Draconis trafficking network rescued 50,000 children from sexual slavery. The chamber fell silent as the implications of Chancellor Vex's words settled over the assembly. Finally, the Zephyrian delegate spoke, her voice barely audible through a translator. You are suggesting that these humans are performing functions that we, as civilized governments, should have been performing ourselves. I am stating facts, Chancellor Vex replied. In each case, formal requests for intervention had been submitted to this council. In each case, those requests were buried in committee or dismissed for political reasons. These humans acted where we chose an action. Marcus Chun, meanwhile, was completely unaware of the diplomatic storm his actions had unleashed. He was currently in the Outer Rim, responding to a distress call from a research station that had been attacked by raiders. His ship, the Enhanced Second Chance, had made the journey from the inner colonies in just 8 hours, a feat that would have been impossible with conventional technology. The research station hung in space like a broken toy, its hull breached in multiple places, its distress beacon the only sign that anyone aboard might still be alive. Marcus guided his ship through the debris field, using sensors that could detect life signs through meters of twisted metal. Jenny, he said to the ship's AI, how many survivors are you reading? 17 life signs. Marcus, the enhanced AI replied. 12 adults and 5 children. They're trapped in the station's emergency shelter, but life support is failing. I estimate they have perhaps 2 hours of breathable atmosphere remaining. Marcus had performed dozens of rescue operations since receiving the Shaper's gift, but each one still moved him. The knowledge that his actions could mean the difference between life and death for innocent people never failed to focus his mind with laser intensity. Can we dock directly with the emergency shelter? Negative. The station's docking bay has been destroyed. However, I can use the ship's matter manipulation systems to create a sealed tunnel directly to their location. Marcus watched in continued amazement as a ship extended what appeared to be a flexible corridor made of the same crystalline material as the Shaper's vessel. The tunnel flowed through space like liquid, forming an airtight seal against the research station's hull, and then somehow passing through the solid metal to reach the survivors. The rescue itself was routine by the standards Marcus had grown accustomed to. The researchers and their families were grateful, frightened, and eager to return to civilization. But as he was loading the last of the survivors aboard his ship, the youngest child, a girl of perhaps 6 years old, tugged on his sleeve. "Mister," she said in the voice of someone too young to understand the magnitude of what had just happened, "are you one of the angels?" Marcus knelt to her eye level, confused. "Angels? I'm sorry, sweetheart, I don't understand." The girl's mother, Dr. Elena Vasquez, smiled despite her obvious exhaustion. "The children have been calling you angels, the humans in the magic ships who show up whenever people need help. They've been following the news reports." Dr. Vasquez was a xenobiologist, and as they traveled toward the nearest inhabited system, she explained the research her team had been conducting on extremophile organisms. But their conversation was interrupted by Jenny's announcement that they were receiving a priority transmission from an unexpected source. "Marcus," the AI said with a note of surprise, "we're being contacted by the Shaper's vessel. She's requesting permission to come aboard." Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate. He hadn't seen or heard from the Shaper since their encounter on New Hebron, though he had often wondered if she was watching his activities. "Tell her she's welcome aboard." The same impossible doorway opened in the side of his ship, and the Shaper stepped through as if walking from one room to another rather than transferring between vessels traveling at faster-than-light speeds. The survivors from the research station stared in awe, recognizing her immediately from the countless news broadcasts that had followed her gift to humanity. "Marcus, Chun," the Shaper said, her luminous eyes showing an emotion he couldn't quite identify. "I need to speak with you privately." They moved to his ship's small ready room, leaving Dr. Vasquez to care for her colleagues and the children. Once the door closed behind them, the Shaper's composed demeanor cracked slightly, revealing something that looked almost like vulnerability. "I have made a terrible mistake," she said without preamble. Marcus felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "What do you mean?" "The gift I gave to humanity has created consequences I did not anticipate. The Galactic Council is in emergency session debating whether to take military action against your species. 3 major civilizations have formed an alliance specifically to counter what they perceive as the human threat. Wars may begin because of what I have done." Marcus sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of unintended consequences. "What can we do? Should I return the ship? Should we stop the rescue operations?" The Shaper's expression grew fierce. "Never. What you and the others have accomplished proves that my assessment of human moral courage was correct. You have saved hundreds of thousands of lives, freed entire worlds from oppression, and shown the galaxy what heroism truly looks like. The problem is not what you have done, but how others have responded to it." She moved to the viewport, staring out at the stars. "For millennia, the great civilizations have maintained order through careful balance of power and mutual deterrence. They have grown comfortable with controlled suffering, acceptable losses, manageable atrocities. Your actions have disrupted that comfortable complacency. So what happens now?" Marcus asked. The Shaper turned back to him, and her smile carried depths of meaning that made his breath catch. "Now, Marcus Chun, I offer you a choice that will determine the future of the galaxy. I can take back the gifts I have given. I can erase the enhanced technology, return humanity to its previous limitations, and allow the established powers to return to their comfortable status quo." Marcus felt his heart sink, but she continued before he could respond. "Or you can help me give humanity something far more significant than advanced technology. You can help me give your species the tools to reshape galactic civilization entirely." The implications of her words hit Marcus like a physical force. "What are you talking about?" The Shaper's eyes began to glow with inner light, and her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate through dimensions Marcus couldn't perceive. "I'm talking about revealing the truth behind my existence, my nature, and the source of my power. I'm talking about offering humanity a partnership that would make them the guardians of galactic civilization rather than merely another technological threat." She gestured, and the air around them shimmered with possibility. "But such a partnership would require sacrifice, Marcus Chun. It would require you and the others to accept responsibilities that would forever separate you from the simple lives you once knew. It would make you protectors of species you have never met, guardians of worlds you have never seen." Marcus thought of the little girl who had called him an angel, of the countless beings who suffered while civilized governments debated and delayed. He thought of the Vorthax slave markets, the trafficking networks, the genocides that proceeded unchecked because intervention was politically inconvenient. "What kind of sacrifice?" he asked quietly. "The sacrifice of anonymity, of safety, of the possibility of ever again being just a freight hauler living a quiet life. If you accept my partnership, you become something new, the first of a new kind of guardian that the galaxy has never seen before." The Shaper's proposition hung in the air between them, laden with consequences that would ripple across the entire known universe. Marcus realized that his response would not just affect his own life, but would determine whether humanity became a force for justice on a galactic scale or retreated back into the comfortable obscurity of local concerns. The weight of that choice was staggering, but as he looked into the Shaper's luminous eyes, Marcus Chun found himself thinking of 47 billion lives that would have been lost if he hadn't acted 6 months ago, and of the countless billions more who might be saved by what happened next. His response, when it came, would indeed stun every civilization in the galaxy, but not in the way any of them expected. Marcus Chun stood in the ready room of his impossible ship, looking into the luminous eyes of the most powerful being in known space, and gave the response that would echo through history. "Before I answer," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something. All this power you have, all these abilities, where do they come from? Will you really?" The Shaper's expression became infinitely sad, and for a moment she looked not like a goddess among mortals, but like someone carrying an unbearable burden. "I'm the last of my kind," she said simply. "We called ourselves the Architects. We were the first civilization to achieve true mastery over matter and energy, the first to transcend physical limitations and become beings of pure will and intention. We shaped worlds, guided the evolution of lesser species, maintained order across the galaxy for over 1,000,000 years." She moved to the viewport again, her fingers trailing patterns of light against the transparent aluminum. "We were also the first to discover the fundamental flaw in transcendence. The more powerful we became, the more distant we grew from the concerns of mortal life. We began to see suffering as an abstract concept, death as a minor inconvenience, individual lives as insignificant compared to the grand patterns of cosmic order." Marcus felt a chill as the implications of her words became clear. "What happened?" "We allowed a genocide to proceed because interfering would have disrupted our carefully maintained galactic balance. 50 billion beings died while we debated the philosophical implications of intervention. When the youngest of our kind, myself, protested this decision, my elders explained that such suffering was inevitable, that our role was to maintain cosmic order, not to prevent individual tragedies." The Shaper's voice carried pain that seemed to span millennia. "I rebelled against their decision. I saved what few survivors I could, and in doing so, I violated our most sacred law, the prohibition against using our power to alter the natural course of events. My people cast me out, stripped me of most of my abilities, and condemned me to immortal exile." She turned back to Marcus, tears flowing freely down her translucent cheeks. "They called me the Shaper as a curse, a reminder that I had shaped events according to my personal judgment rather than cosmic wisdom. But I wore that curse as a badge of honor, and I have spent the past 1,000 years trying to undo the damage caused by their indifference. Marcus absorbed this revelation, understanding for the first time the magnitude of what the Shaper had sacrificed for her principles. And now you're asking me to help you do something your own people wouldn't approve of. I am asking you to help me prove that transcendence doesn't require the loss of compassion. That power can be wielded by beings who still care about individual suffering, who still see value in single lives. The Shaper's eyes blazed with determination. My people believed that mortal concerns were beneath transcendent beings. You and your species have shown them that they were wrong. The weight of her request settled on Marcus's shoulders, but strangely, he found himself feeling not overwhelmed but inspired. What exactly are you proposing? The Shaper gestured, and the air around them filled with holographic displays showing star charts, technical diagrams, and flowing script in languages Marcus didn't recognize. I propose to share with humanity not just advanced technology, but the fundamental principles behind transcendence itself. I will teach willing humans to manipulate matter and energy as I do, to travel instantly across galactic distances, to heal wounds that should be fatal. In return, you will swear to use these abilities only in defense of life, only to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Marcus stared at the displays, trying to comprehend what she was offering. You're talking about making humans into gods. I'm talking about making humans into what gods should be, the Shaper corrected. Beings of great power who still remember what it means to be mortal, who still care about the suffering of individuals rather than just the grand patterns of history. The implications were staggering. How many humans would receive these abilities? As many as prove themselves worthy through their actions. I have been monitoring the activities of those who receive my ships. 12 humans now possess vessels like yours, and each has chosen to use them for humanitarian purposes rather than personal gain. They're the beginning, Marcus, but you... She paused, her expression growing reverent. You were the first. You set the example that inspired the others. If you accept my offer, you become a template for a new kind of guardian. Marcus thought of Dr. Vasquez and her colleagues in the next compartment, of the little girl who had called him an angel, of the countless beings across the galaxy who suffered while their governments failed to act. What would happen to me personally? What would I become? The Shaper's smile was radiant. You would become yourself, Marcus Chun, but with the power to act on your convictions regardless of distance, politics, or opposition. You would still feel pain, still experience doubt, still face difficult choices. But you would never again be helpless to act when action is needed. She extended her hand toward him, and Marcus could see energy patterns swirling around her fingers like living light. The transformation is irreversible, she warned. Once you accept my gift, you can never return to being merely human. You become something new, something the galaxy has never seen before, a transcendent being who chooses to remain mortal in all the ways that matter. Marcus looked at her outstretched hand, understanding that his next action would change not just his own fate, but the future of every sentient being in the galaxy. The choice was enormous, terrifying, and absolutely necessary. He reached out and grasped her hand. The sensation was indescribable. Power flowed through Marcus like molten starlight, rewriting his cellular structure at the molecular level, while somehow leaving his essential self unchanged. He could feel his consciousness expanding, touching the minds of every living being within light years, sensing their hopes and fears and desperate needs. The universe revealed itself to him in all its vast complexity, showing him the intricate webs of cause and effect that connected every action to every consequence. But through it all, he remained Marcus Chun, freight hauler, rescuer of stranded travelers, a man who had once thrown his life away to save strangers. When the transformation completed, Marcus found himself looking at the Shaper with new eyes that could perceive the quantum foundations of reality. She was beautiful beyond description, but He could also see the loneliness that had shaped her for 1,000 years, the burden of being the only transcendent being who still cared about individual suffering. "How do you feel?" she asked softly. Marcus tested his new abilities, reaching out with senses that could detect life across multiple star systems, feeling the pain of beings he had never met but was now sworn to protect. "Responsible," he said finally. "More responsible than I've ever felt in my life." The Shaper's laughter was like music made of pure joy. "Then, I have chosen well. Come, Marcus Chun, first of the new Guardians. It is time to announce our partnership to the galaxy." They returned to the main cabin, where Dr. Vasquez and her team had been caring for the rescued children. The survivors looked up as Marcus entered, and several of them gasped at the change in his appearance. He still looked human, but there was something in his eyes now that suggested depths beyond mortal understanding. "Dr. Vasquez," Marcus said, "I need to ask you and your team to bear witness to something that will change the course of galactic history." The Shaper moved to the center of the cabin, her presence somehow making the space feel larger than its physical dimensions. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, her voice carrying across subspace frequencies that would reach every inhabited system within hours. "I am the being you know as the Shaper, last of the architects, guardian of the innocent, and defender of the oppressed. Across the galaxy, every communication device capable of receiving subspace transmissions began broadcasting her words. On 1,000 worlds, billions of beings stopped what they were doing to listen. 6 months ago, a human named Marcus Chun proved to me that transcendent power need not require the loss of compassion. Today, I offer that same transcendence to his species, not as conquerors or rulers, but as guardians sworn to protect all life." The Galactic Council chambers erupted in chaos as delegates realized what they were hearing. Admiral Threx of the Vorthack roared in fury. Ambassador Kelfin's crystalline form flashed through spectrums of alarm. Even the usually composed Centauri representative showed signs of agitation. But the Shaper continued, her voice carrying across the galaxy with absolute clarity. "Humanity has shown me something I thought was lost forever. The willingness to sacrifice everything for strangers, to act on moral conviction regardless of personal cost. They have reminded me that true power lies not in the ability to reshape matter and energy, but in choosing to use that ability in service of others. On Earth, in government buildings and military command centers, humans watched in stunned amazement as their species was offered a role they had never dreamed of claiming. Therefore, the Shaper announced, I offer formal partnership to the human species. Those among them who prove themselves worthy through their actions will receive the abilities I possess, to travel instantly across any distance, to manipulate matter and energy at the molecular level, to heal injuries that should be fatal, to stand as guardians against those who would harm the innocent. Marcus stepped forward, and his voice joined hers in the galaxy-wide broadcast. I accept this partnership on behalf of humanity, not as rulers or conquerors, but as protectors. We swear to use these gifts only in defense of life, only to help those who cannot help themselves. The response from across the galaxy was immediate and overwhelming. On enslaved worlds, beings looked up at the stars with hope for the first time in generations. In the corridors of power, tyrants and oppressors felt the first stirrings of fear as they contemplated the implications of humans with godlike abilities, but mortal compassion. Ambassador Martinez, watching from the Galactic Council chambers, found herself standing as representatives from hundreds of worlds began demanding to know what this meant for the existing political order. It means, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chaos, that the age of acceptable suffering is over. It means that those who prey on the innocent now face opposition they cannot bribe, cannot threaten, and cannot destroy. It means that justice will no longer be subject to political convenience. The Andromedan ambassador's form shifted through patterns of fury. This is a declaration of war against established government. No, Marcus replied through the open channel, his transformed voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through space itself. This is a declaration of protection for the innocent. We will not interfere with legitimate governance. We will act only when governments fail to protect their people or when they actively harm them. As if to emphasize his point, the displays in the council chambers lit up with reports from across the galaxy. Vorthack slave markets were being liberated by humans who appeared out of nowhere. Trafficking networks were being dismantled by beings who could walk through walls and teleport across star systems. Genocidal armies found their weapons simply ceasing to function when turned against civilian populations. The transformation had begun, and it would reshape the galaxy forever. Dr. Vasquez, still clutching her young daughter, looked up at Marcus with wonder and a little fear. What happens to people like us? Regular people who aren't transcendent guardians. Marcus knelt beside the little girl who had called him an angel, and his smile carried all the warmth and humanity that his transformation had preserved. You continue being the most important people in the universe, he said gently, because everything we do, every power we use, every choice we make, it's all in service of protecting your right to live free from fear, to pursue happiness, to raise your children in safety. The child looked up at him with eyes full of trust. Will you really keep us safe from the bad people? Yes, sweetheart, Marcus promised, and his voice carried the weight of cosmic power wedded to mortal love. We will keep you safe. Across the galaxy, the new age was beginning. An age where transcendent power served mortal compassion, where the strong protected the weak not from duty but from choice, where the question was no longer whether justice could triumph over oppression, but how quickly it could be delivered. The human who had saved a shaper had become the first of a new kind of guardian, and her response, the gift of transcendence wedded to humanity's inexhaustible capacity for heroism, would indeed stun every civilization in known space. But more importantly, it would give hope to the countless billions who had lived without it for far too long. The universe had discovered what humanity could accomplish when given the tools to match their courage, and it would never be the same.